It was a night like any other. Elijah sat at the dinner table, dressed in his sharp suit, casually glancing over his phone. His wife, Imani, entered the room, her steps quiet, her head down. She wore a cheap, faded dress, one that barely resembled the elegant gowns she used to wear. Elijah looked up, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "Is this what you're wearing tonight? Honestly, I can't believe you're still wearing that cheap thing," he scoffed, chuckling under his breath. What Elijah didn't know was that Imani's heart was breaking in silence. She had sold every valuable item they owned, her jewelry, her clothes, and even their family heirlooms, all to save his mother from a life-threatening illness. She'd done it without a word, without any expectation of praise. But tonight, her husband's cruel words were more than she could bear. Where are you watching from? Share your location and local time in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional tales like this one. Imani tried to hold back the tears as she stood there in front of Elijah, her heart heavy with the burden she had kept hidden for weeks. She had always been a proud woman, proud of her family, proud of her sacrifices. But tonight, Elijah's laughter had shattered that pride. It was as if all the effort, all the love, had been reduced to nothing but ridicule. I did it for you," she whispered, barely able to find her voice. Elijah raised an eyebrow, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Did what for me? Buy that awful dress? I'm embarrassed to be seen with you in that." The words stung more than he could have imagined. Imani's hands trembled as she set the dishes on the table, her body cold despite the warmth of the room. She had been up all night, not sleeping but pacing the floor, agonizing over the decision she had made. Selling everything she owned, including her cherished heirlooms, was never something she had imagined herself doing. But when Elijah's mother, Nana, fell ill, Imani knew there was no other choice. Nana had been a second mother to her, and even though she and Elijah had their struggles, she couldn't bear the thought of losing her. Imani had walked into the pawn shop, her pride swallowing the pain she felt as she parted with her most precious belongings. Each item she sold, her wedding ring, the antique necklace her grandmother had passed down, felt like another piece of her soul was being taken. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that Nana needed the treatment, and if Imani could make the difference, she would do whatever it took. She thought she was doing the right thing. She thought she was being the supportive wife. But now, faced with Elijah's cruel words, Imani questioned everything. Did he even care? Was this the man she had married? A man who couldn't even see the sacrifice she had made. A man who valued appearances over the woman standing before him? As Elijah took a bite of his dinner, oblivious to the storm brewing inside his wife, Imani felt a tear slip down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, not wanting to let him see her vulnerability. But she was exhausted physically, emotionally, and mentally. She had given everything she had for him, for his family, and yet it felt like it was never enough. "You don't understand, Elijah," Imani said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did this because I love you. I love your mother, and I wanted to give her a chance at life." Elijah stopped chewing, the words hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. He stared at her, confusion flickering in his eyes, followed by a tinge of irritation. "What are you talking about? What do you mean? Give her a chance at life?" Imani's chest tightened as she tried to gather the courage to explain. "When Nana got sick, you couldn't afford her treatment. The doctors said it was too late for her, that there was no hope unless she had the surgery. And I didn't want to see her die. I sold everything we had, our family treasures, my jewelry, even the things I thought I could never part with to pay for the treatment she needed. I did it all without asking you, because I knew you would have refused. But I did it for you, for your mother." A silence settled over the room, thick and suffocating. Elijah's fork clattered to his plate as he sat back in his chair, stunned into silence. Imani looked down at her hands, unwilling to meet his gaze, unsure of what he would say next. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, a hug, an apology, some acknowledgement that she had done something incredible. But all she saw in his eyes was confusion, maybe even a bit of disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elijah asked, his voice suddenly soft. I didn't want to burden you, Imani replied. You were already under enough stress with your mother's condition. I thought it would be better if I handled it myself. I wanted to be strong for you. Imani's voice broke as she spoke, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. She had always been the strong one, the one who kept things together, but tonight, she felt like she was falling apart, and Elijah's indifference was like a knife to her heart. Elijah stood up from the table and walked over to Imani, kneeling in front of her. He reached out, gently lifting her chin so that she had no choice but to look at him. His face was no longer filled with anger or mockery. It was filled with guilt, remorse, and something else, something Imani couldn't quite place. I never knew, Elijah said, his voice trembling slightly. I never knew you were carrying all of this alone. I never realized how much you've been through. Imani's tears flowed freely now, the dam that had held them back for so long finally breaking. I did it because I love you, she sobbed, and I thought you would be proud of me, but instead, I feel invisible. I feel like I don't even matter to you. Elijah's heart ached as he watched his wife break down in front of him. He had never seen her so vulnerable, so hurt. All this time, he had been so wrapped up in his own world, in his own success, that he had completely ignored the woman who had always been there for him, who had sacrificed so much for him and his family. I'm sorry, Imani, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you. I should have seen everything you were doing. I should have been the one supporting you, not the other way around. Imani shook her head, still crying. It's too late for apologies now, Elijah. The damage has been done. Elijah's heart sank as he realized the weight of his actions. He had mocked his wife, laughed at her for wearing a dress that was a symbol of her sacrifice. And in doing so, he had made her feel worthless. He had taken everything for granted, the love she gave him, the efforts she made for his family, the sacrifices she had quietly borne. I don't deserve you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't deserve your love. But I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I'll do whatever it takes to show you how much you mean to me. Imani wiped her tears and looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hope. She didn't know if she could forgive him so easily, but the sincerity in his voice made her believe that he truly understood the depth of his mistake. I need time, Imani said softly. I need time to heal, but I'm willing to try if you are. Elijah nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. I'll wait for you, Imani, as long as it takes. I love you. In that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't an immediate fix, it wasn't a magic word that would erase the hurt, but it was a beginning, a fragile hope that, with time, they could rebuild what had been broken. Imani wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. And that was enough for her to believe in love again. Days passed in silence between Imani and Elijah. The house felt cold, as though a wall had been erected between them, an invisible barrier that neither of them knew how to break. Imani tried to return to her normal routine, cooking dinner, cleaning, but the once vibrant energy in their home had dimmed. Every glance from Elijah, every word spoken, felt heavy, as if both of them were walking on eggshells, too afraid to truly face the emotional mess they had created. Imani spent her days in reflection, replaying the night of Elijah's laughter over and over in her mind. The sting of his words had settled deep in her heart, and though his apology was sincere, it didn't erase the hurt she felt. How could it? She had given up everything, her dignity, her possessions, even her sense of self, just to save his mother. And yet he had mocked her for it. The betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow. Elijah, on the other hand, couldn't escape the crushing weight of his actions. He tried, in his own way, to reach out to Imani, but every time he spoke, he felt as though his words were falling flat. He'd sent her flowers, left sweet notes around the house, and even offered to take her out for a special dinner. But each gesture seemed meaningless when the root of their problem, the disconnect between them, had yet to be addressed. One evening, Elijah came home from work to find Imani sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an old photograph of them together. She was holding it gently in her hands, her eyes tracing the familiar faces of their younger selves. It was a picture from their honeymoon, Elijah and Imani standing on a beach, laughing, carefree, so full of love and hope for the future. They looked like they had everything, like nothing could ever tear them apart. But things had changed. Imani didn't even notice when Elijah entered the room. Her mind was miles away, lost in memories of the past, of better times. It wasn't until Elijah spoke her name softly that she snapped out of her thoughts. "Imani," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." Imani looked up slowly, her eyes tired, her face worn. She had been expecting this moment, but she didn't know if she was ready for it. She didn't know if she could have this conversation without breaking down again. "Do we?" she replied quietly, her voice hollow. She wasn't sure where to start. She didn't even know what she wanted to say. "Yes," Elijah said, stepping closer. He took the seat next to her at the table, his eyes searching hers. "I know I hurt you, and I know I've failed you. But I can't move forward unless you tell me what you need from me. What do you need to heal, Imani?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. It wasn't easy to speak the truth, especially not when it meant confronting everything that had gone wrong between them. "I need you to understand, Elijah. I need you to understand that I did everything for you, no, for us. I sold everything I had to save your mother's life, and you laughed at me. You laughed at the one thing I sacrificed everything for." She stopped, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "It's not just about the dress, Elijah. It's not about the things I sold. It's about the fact that you didn't see me. You didn't see the woman who has stood by your side through everything. You didn't see the love I gave you, the love that kept me going, even when I didn't have anything left." Imani's voice quivered as she spoke. The anger and hurt had been building up inside her for so long, and now, with Elijah sitting beside her, it all came pouring out. "You never asked if I was okay. You never noticed when I needed help. You never saw how much I was carrying, how much I was giving up. And when I needed you the most, when I needed you to see me for who I am, you laughed. And that broke me." Elijah's heart clenched at her words. The depth of her pain was something he had never fully understood until now. He had been so focused on his own world, his success, his mother's illness, his career, that he had completely overlooked the woman who had been his rock, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. His selfishness had blindsided him, and now, as Imani's words cut through him, he realized just how deeply he had hurt her. "I didn't see it," Elijah admitted, his voice cracking. "I didn't see what you were doing because I was too caught up in my own world. I thought I was doing everything for us, but I ignored the most important person in my life. I ignored you." Imani looked away, the weight of his words sinking in. "It's not just about the dress," she repeated softly. "It's about everything. It's about how I've always been there for you. But when I needed you, you weren't there for me." Elijah sat there, speechless, realizing just how much he had taken her for granted. He had never asked her what she needed. He had never understood that her sacrifices were not just for him, but for their future, for the life they were supposed to build together. He had been blind to her pain, too focused on his own ambitions to notice that the woman he loved was drowning in silence. "Imani," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion, "I am so sorry. I've been selfish, and I've been blind. But I see you now. I see everything you've done for me, for us. And I promise, I will never take you for granted again. I will be the husband you deserve." Imani didn't respond immediately. She sat there, the pain still fresh, the wound too deep to heal in an instant. But there was something in Elijah's words, in the sincerity of his voice, that made her believe that he was truly sorry. He wasn't perfect, and neither was their relationship, but she wanted to believe that they could find their way back to each other, that they could rebuild what had been broken. "I don't know if I can just forget what happened," Imani said quietly. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to heal, if you're willing to change." Elijah nodded, his eyes filled with determination. I will do whatever it takes, Imani. Whatever it takes. In that moment, Imani felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they were on the same page. And maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild their life together brick by brick, day by day. As they sat there, side by side, Imani realized that healing wouldn't come overnight. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be moments of doubt and pain. But as long as Elijah was willing to change, as long as he was willing to see her, she could find the strength to move forward. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they might just have a chance. The days following their conversation felt like an endless stretch of both tension and hope. Imani and Elijah moved around each other cautiously, unsure of how to rebuild what had been broken. But there was a change subtle at first, like the first hint of dawn after a long, dark night. Elijah was trying. He was making an effort, but Imani couldn't help but wonder if it was enough. Could the hurt really be healed? Could she trust him again? Elijah had taken a step back from his work, realizing that for years he had been too focused on his career and too blind to the needs of his wife. He made a promise to Imani to prioritize her and their family, something he had taken for granted for far too long. He started to take more time for her, helping with the house, making plans for weekends together, and even asking her opinion about things, small gestures. But to Imani, they meant the world. One afternoon, Imani walked into the living room to find Elijah sitting on the couch with his laptop open, going through some documents. His face was tense, and he looked exhausted. Imani could see the strain in his posture, the way his hands gripped the keyboard. "Elijah," she called softly, stepping into the room. He looked up, his eyes softening when he saw her. "Hey, you're home early," he said, but his voice lacked the usual energy. Imani paused, her heart aching at the sight of him. She knew he was trying to balance everything, his work, his family, and his efforts to repair their marriage, but it was taking a toll. She had seen the exhaustion in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sitting down beside him on the couch. He sighed deeply, rubbing his face with his hands. "It's just the workload. I've been trying to keep everything together, but it's like there's always something else that needs attention, and I feel like I'm failing in every area of my life." Imani placed a gentle hand on his. "You're not failing, Elijah. You're doing the best you can, but you can't do it all alone." Elijah's gaze softened, and he looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "I don't want to fail you again. You've given so much, and I've been blind to it all. I can't go back to who I was." Imani could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. The Elijah sitting beside her now wasn't the man who had mocked her sacrifice. This was a man who had recognized his flaws and was trying to be better, for her, for them. But even with the best intentions, Imani knew that healing wasn't a quick fix. It was a long, winding road, and they both had a long way to go. "I know, Elijah," she said softly, her voice steady. "But we have to take it one step at a time, and that means we have to talk more. About everything. We can't keep burying things." He nodded, a small, weary smile tugging at his lips. "You're right. I'll work on being more open with you, more present." They spent the next few hours talking, really talking. For the first time in a long time, they opened up to each other about their fears, their frustrations, and their dreams for the future. Imani shared the pain she had kept hidden, the loneliness she had felt for so long, and how deeply the ridicule had affected her. Elijah, in turn, revealed the pressure he had been under, the fear of losing his mother, and the fear that he wasn't good enough for Imani. It was a raw conversation, one that exposed the raw vulnerability of both of them, but it was necessary. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Elijah wrapped his arms around Imani, pulling her close. "I'm sorry for everything, Imani. I know I can't take back what I've done, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Imani snuggled closer, her heart still guarded but softer than it had been in weeks. "I know you'll try, and that's all I can ask for right now. I need time, Elijah. I need time to fully forgive and heal, but I'm willing to try too. For us. They fell asleep in each other's arms, both of them knowing that the road ahead would be difficult, but hopeful that with effort and time, they could find their way back to each other. Weeks passed, and things between Imani and Elijah slowly began to improve. They worked through their issues, both the small, everyday struggles and the deeper, more emotional wounds that had festered for so long. They took walks together, laughed over simple moments, and started to rebuild their trust, piece by piece. There were still moments of tension, still moments when the hurt would rise to the surface, but they had learned how to talk about it, how to listen to each other, and most importantly, how to support each other. One Saturday morning, Imani and Elijah were sitting on their porch, enjoying a quiet breakfast together. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was warm. For the first time in a long time, there was peace between them. Elijah turned to Imani, his eyes filled with a quiet affection. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful for you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I'm grateful for your patience, your strength. You've always been there for me, and I promise I'll never take that for granted again." Imani smiled softly, her heart warmed by his words. "We've both made mistakes, Elijah, but we're working through them. We're healing, and that's what matters." The peace they shared in that moment wasn't just about the absence of conflict. It was about something deeper, an understanding, a connection that had been built not just on love, but on the willingness to face their flaws, to admit when they were wrong, and to fight for their relationship. That afternoon, they went for a walk in the park, hand in hand. The weight of the past still hung over them, but it no longer felt insurmountable. Together, they knew they could move forward. Together, they knew they could heal. Elijah had learned a lesson that Imani had known all along, that love wasn't just about grand gestures or material gifts. It was about the small, everyday actions that showed you cared. It was about being present, being supportive, and understanding that sometimes the greatest sacrifices were the ones that no one ever saw. As they walked through the park, laughing together, Imani realized that the love they shared had grown stronger in ways she hadn't expected. The journey wasn't easy, but it had brought them closer, and for that, she was thankful. And as they looked ahead, the future didn't seem so daunting anymore. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they would face it together. As time passed, the house began to feel like home again. The silence that had hung between Elijah and Imani was slowly replaced with laughter, shared conversations, and even moments of playful teasing. Imani had let go of some of the anger she had carried for so long, though it still lingered in the corners of her heart, ready to resurface when things weren't quite right. She couldn't forget the pain Elijah had caused her, but with each day that passed, she could see that he was truly trying to be a better husband. Elijah, for his part, had shown Imani that he was committed to change. He made more time for her, something he had neglected to do before, and had started to listen with more patience. His once constant workaholic tendencies were now tempered with a focus on their relationship. He knew that love wasn't just about grand gestures anymore. It was about being present, being supportive, and learning how to truly see each other. Yet, even with all of these positive changes, Imani knew that their healing process was far from complete. Every now and then, she would catch herself reliving the hurt of that day, the day Elijah had laughed at her dress, not knowing what she had sacrificed. She knew that the wound would not heal overnight, but she was determined to work through it, not just for Elijah, but for herself. She had to rebuild her own sense of worth, one piece at a time. One evening, as they sat together on the couch after dinner, Imani glanced at Elijah, who was quietly reading a book. His presence beside her, though comforting, felt distant at times. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something was still missing, the connection that they had once shared so effortlessly. Perhaps, in all their attempts to fix what was broken, they had neglected the very thing that made their love unique: intimacy. Elijah sensed the shift in Imani's energy. He looked up from his book, meeting her gaze with curiosity. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. Imani hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put her thoughts into words. "I've been thinking about us," she began, her voice quiet. "About everything we've been through. And while I can see how much you're trying, I think we've lost something. Something important." Elijah set his book down, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" Imani took a deep breath, gathering the courage to speak her truth. "We've been so focused on fixing the things we've broken, our trust, our communication, our marriage, that I think we've forgotten about the part that made us fall in love in the first place, the part where we could just be with each other, enjoy each other's company without all the weight of everything else." Elijah's eyes softened as he listened to her. "You're right," he said after a long pause. "I've been so focused on making up for my mistakes that I forgot to just be present with you. I've been trying to fix everything, but I haven't been making time for what really matters, the connection between us." Imani nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I miss us, Elijah. I miss the way things used to feel before everything got so complicated, before the hurt and the misunderstandings. I just want to find that again without all the guilt and the fixing." Elijah reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I miss that too," he said softly, "and I want to find it again. Imani, I don't want to just fix things because I feel like I have to. I want us to be happy again, just for the sake of being happy." Imani felt a lump form in her throat. "But how do we do that? How do we find our way back to the place where we were before everything changed?" Elijah looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "I think it starts with us being honest with each other. Not just about the big things, but about the little things too. It's about being open, being vulnerable again. It's about rediscovering the joy in being with each other, without all the expectations." Imani smiled softly, the warmth in her heart returning. "That sounds like a good place to start." Over the next few weeks, they began to rediscover each other. They took small steps, going for walks together, sitting in comfortable silence, sharing silly stories from their past. They laughed more. And though the pain of the past still lingered, it no longer consumed them. They found joy in the simple moments, in the act of just being together, without the weight of past mistakes pressing down on them. Elijah took the time to ask Imani about her day, to really listen when she spoke, and to show her, through his actions, that he was committed to their happiness. Imani, in turn, let her guard down little by little, trusting that Elijah wasn't going to hurt her again. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the old insecurities crept in, but they were learning to navigate the complexities of their relationship together. One evening, as they sat in their living room, Imani turned to Elijah, her heart full of gratitude. "I think we're getting there," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "I think we're finally finding our way back." Elijah nodded, his eyes warm with affection. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Imani's smile grew, and she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, we have, and I think we'll keep moving forward, together." As the days went on, they both realized that the road to healing wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and difficult conversations, but they were no longer afraid of those moments. They knew that, with patience, understanding, and love, they could face whatever challenges came their way. One Sunday afternoon, they decided to spend the day at the beach. It had been a long time since they had done something so simple, and Imani felt a sense of peace wash over her as she watched Elijah playfully chase her along the shoreline. For a brief moment, it felt like everything was, as it once was, full of joy, laughter, and the carefree love they had shared in the beginning. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elijah turned to Imani, his eyes serious but full of love. "I promise, I'll never take you for granted again," he said, his voice steady. "I've learned that love isn't just about the big gestures, it's about being there, every day, in the small moments." Imani smiled, her heart full. "And I'll keep reminding you of that," she teased, though there was no malice in her words, only affection. They both laughed, the sound echoing in the evening air, and in that moment, Imani knew that they had found something precious. The connection, the love, the trust, it was all slowly returning. And though the journey was far from over, it felt like they were finally on the right path. As the night settled in, they sat in silence, comfortable in each other's company. The past was no longer the weight that had once dragged them down. Together, they had learned to let go, to forgive, and to love again. And for the first time in a long time, Imani felt like she could breathe, not because everything was perfect, but because she knew they were in it together. And that, she realized, was all that mattered. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of their life began to feel more settled, more balanced. There were still moments when the past would rear its head, but each time it did, Imani and Elijah met it head-on, with a newfound understanding and the commitment to move forward together. They had learned, slowly but surely, that their marriage was not perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. Imani had noticed something subtle but important in the way Elijah had started to look at her. It wasn't just about the way he apologized or tried to make things right. It was the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the way he made an effort to share his day with her, and how he genuinely listened when she spoke. He wasn't just hearing her, he was listening. And for Imani, that meant everything. She had also learned something about herself during their time of healing. She had always prided herself on being strong, independent, and capable of handling everything on her own. But as she reflected on the past months, she realized that strength wasn't about doing everything alone. Strength was about being vulnerable, about admitting when you needed help, and most importantly, about letting someone else in. It was something she had struggled with for a long time, but now, with Elijah by her side, she felt like she could finally breathe again. One evening, after dinner, as they sat on the couch, Imani felt a sudden wave of gratitude for the simple things they now shared. The evening had been uneventful, no grand gestures, no dramatic moments, but it was exactly what she had needed. She had spent so many years chasing the idea of what their marriage should look like. But now, sitting there with Elijah, she realized that love didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be real. "Elijah," Imani said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us, and about what we've been through." He turned to her, his eyes full of curiosity. "What about it?" Imani took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I just want to thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up on us, even when I didn't know if I could trust you again. I know I'm not easy to love, but you've really shown me what it means to be loved. You've made me believe in us again." Elijah's heart swelled at her words. He had always known how strong Imani was, but hearing her vulnerability, hearing her admit that she had doubted him, made him feel more connected to her than ever. "I've always loved you, Imani, and I'll keep showing you, every day, that I'm not going anywhere. You're worth the effort, and I'm willing to fight for this fight for us." Imani smiled softly, the tension she had carried for so long finally starting to fade. It felt like they were in a new chapter of their relationship, one where they could finally let go of the weight of their past mistakes and just enjoy each other. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The following weekend, Elijah suggested that they take a trip together, a short weekend getaway to a small cabin by a lake, away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. Imani agreed, knowing that they both needed this time to reconnect, without distractions or the pressures of everyday life. It was just the two of them, away from everything else, and for the first time in a long time, Imani felt a sense of peace wash over her. When they arrived at the cabin, surrounded by towering trees and the soft murmur of the lake, it felt like a fresh start. The world outside seemed distant, and in that space, it was just them, no expectations, no obligations. Imani felt a quiet joy settle within her, knowing that this was the kind of moment she had longed for. This was the kind of moment she had once believed would be impossible. As they unpacked and settled in, Elijah took Imani by the hand, leading her out onto the porch. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the water. The air was crisp and fresh, and for the first time in a long time, Imani felt completely at ease. Elijah pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Thank you for coming with me," Elijah said, his voice soft, as he kissed the top of her head. "This means everything to me." Imani leaned into him, the sound of the water gently lapping at the shore in the background. "I needed this, Elijah. We both did." They spent the rest of the weekend hiking, laughing, and talking about everything and nothing. They had no agenda, no time constraints. It was just about being present with each other, reconnecting in ways they hadn't been able to in years. They shared stories, rediscovered things about each other they had forgotten. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they felt completely in tune with one another. On their last evening at the cabin, as they sat by the fire, sipping wine and watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky, Elijah turned to Imani, his eyes serious, but full of love. "Imani," he said, his voice a little shaky, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I know we've been through a lot, and I know there will still be challenges ahead. But I promise you, I'll never stop fighting for us. I'll never stop loving you. You mean everything to me." Imani's heart swelled at his words. She had heard similar promises before, but this time, she knew they were different. This time, she could feel the truth behind them, the weight of everything they had been through together. "I love you too, Elijah," she said softly, her voice full of sincerity. "And I'm ready to keep building this life with you, together." As they sat there, side by side, their fingers entwined, the fire crackling before them, Imani realized that this moment, the quiet, peaceful joy of being with Elijah, was everything she had ever wanted. It wasn't about perfection. It was about love, trust, and the willingness to grow together, despite the past. They weren't perfect, but together they were strong, and that was enough. The road ahead would have its ups and downs, but as long as they faced it together, Imani knew that there was nothing they couldn't overcome. With love and patience, they could rebuild what had been broken, and build something even stronger than before. And in that moment, as the stars shone brightly above them, Imani knew that she had found her way back to Elijah, not just as a wife, but as a partner, a friend, and someone who would continue to fight for their love, no matter what. The days at the cabin had worked wonders for their relationship. The quiet, uninterrupted time together allowed Imani and Elijah to rediscover the simple joys of being in each other's company. For Imani, it was a time to heal, a moment to breathe in the stillness and feel connected to Elijah in ways she hadn't for a long time. Their shared laughter, soft conversations, and the quiet nights by the fire were the moments that grounded her, making her realize that, despite the imperfections, their love was still there, burning bright. Back home, however, the real test began. Returning to the demands of everyday life brought its own set of challenges. Elijah was back at work, his days filled with meetings and the pressure of managing his business, while Imani was slowly re-entering her own routine grocery shopping, working on personal projects, and taking care of the house. The distance that came with their busy schedules was inevitable, but this time, it was different. They were more aware of each other's needs, more attuned to the shifts in the dynamic between them. They had come a long way, but Imani couldn't ignore the subtle tension that still lingered at the edges of their interactions. The scars of the past were not completely healed, and she wasn't sure if they ever would be. One evening, Imani sat on the couch with her journal in her lap, lost in her thoughts. The weight of the past few months of everything they had been through was heavy on her mind. Despite Elijah's efforts to be more present and supportive, there were moments when she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She had forgiven him, yes, but forgiveness didn't mean erasing the past. It meant accepting it, living with it, and learning to grow beyond it. But that growth came slowly. Elijah walked into the room, his tie loosened, his jacket draped over his arm. He stopped when he saw her, noticing the far-off look in her eyes. He had learned to read her so much better now, to recognize when something was on her mind. "Imani?" Elijah said softly, stepping closer. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Imani looked up, startled from her thoughts. She smiled faintly but couldn't completely hide the weariness that lingered in her eyes. Nothing. Just thinking, she replied, closing her journal and setting it aside. He sat down next to her, his hand finding hers. You've been quiet all evening. Talk to me. Imani sighed, her chest tightening as she debated whether to voice the concerns that had been quietly building inside her. She hadn't wanted to bring them up, didn't want to risk rocking the fragile peace they had built. But keeping everything inside was beginning to feel like a weight she couldn't carry alone anymore. I don't know, Elia, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I feel like we're still stuck in a pattern. We've made progress, yes, but sometimes it feels like we're only going through the motions. I don't want to just survive in this marriage. I want to live in it. I want to feel that spark again, the one we had when everything was new. Elijah's heart sank as he listened to her. He knew the weight of her words, the truth behind them. For all the progress they had made, there were still pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. He had promised her that he would work on himself, on being present, on rebuilding trust, but he had never considered that it might not be enough for Imani. I'm sorry, Elijah said quietly, his grip tightening on her hand. I've been so focused on fixing the big things that I might have overlooked the little things, the things that make us us, the moments of laughter, the simple acts of love that used to come naturally. Imani turned to face him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I'm not saying it's all your fault, Elijah, but we can't keep pretending everything's fine when we're both holding on to so much. I want to feel like we're truly together again, like we're more than just two people coexisting in the same house. The pain in Imani's voice was unmistakable, and Elijah could feel it deep in his bones. He had been so caught up in proving himself to her, in making up for the hurt he caused, that he had neglected the intimacy that was the heart of their bond. He had missed the fact that the little moments, the way he touched her hand, the way he kissed her forehead, the way they laughed together, were the foundation of their love. Without those things, they were just two people living parallel lives. I don't want to just go through the motions either, Elijah admitted, his voice filled with regret. You deserve more than that, Imani. I've been trying so hard to make up for what I've done, but I've forgotten that sometimes it's the simple things, the moments of connection that matter the most. Imani's chest tightened as she listened to him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to lean into him fully, to let the vulnerability wash over her. I need to know you're still here, Elijah, that you're really here, with me, not just in body but in spirit. I don't want to keep waiting for something to change. I want us to change together. Elijah's heart ached as he looked into her eyes, seeing the raw honesty and pain there. I'm here, Imani, he said softly, his voice breaking. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll change together, I promise. I don't have all the answers, but I know that we can't do this without each other. We have to keep fighting for us. I'll never stop fighting for you. Imani nodded, her hand trembling in his. I want to believe you, she whispered. I really do. But we have to make this real, Elijah. It can't just be promises anymore. It has to be actions every day, in everything we do. Elijah looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing over her knuckles, as though he were trying to absorb the weight of her words. We'll make it real, Imani. One day at a time. I'm not giving up on us, and I'll show you every day how much I love you. I won't let you go through this alone anymore. Imani looked up at him, her heart filled with cautious hope. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this time would be different. It wasn't about perfection, it was about consistency, about showing up for each other when it mattered most. And she knew that, deep down, they both had the strength to rebuild. They just had to keep choosing each other, every single day. For the first time in a long while, Imani smiled softly, her hand tightening around his. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it, Elijah, together. And as they sat there, in the soft light of the evening, Elijah and Imani knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges. But this time, they were facing it hand in hand, united by the love they were learning to rebuild, one day, one moment, at a time. The days after their conversation felt like a delicate balance between hope and caution. Imani and Elijah knew they had made progress, but there was still so much left to navigate. Their bond, though stronger than before, had to be nurtured carefully, day by day. Elijah had shown her that he was committed, but Imani knew that words alone weren't enough. It was about the small moments, the little things that showed he truly understood what she needed. Elijah, for his part, was working harder than ever to make their relationship his priority. He started to take more initiative at home, making sure Imani didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of their marriage on her own. He planned date nights, small outings, and even cooked dinner a few times, surprising her with his new efforts in the kitchen. The small gestures of love, like making her coffee in the morning or leaving notes of appreciation, began to fill the space that had once been dominated by silence and resentment. But for all the effort Elijah was putting in, Imani couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. She had noticed that while they were making progress in rebuilding their emotional connection, they were still avoiding one of the most important conversations of all about their future. What did their life together look like going forward? Did they still want the same things? And, more importantly, did they feel secure enough in each other to move forward with trust fully intact? One evening, after dinner, Imani sat down in their cozy living room, her mind racing with questions. Elijah, sensing her unease, sat beside her, concern etched on his face. "Imani, what's going on in your mind?" Elijah asked gently, his hand finding hers. "You've been quiet tonight." Imani looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of longing and uncertainty. "I've been thinking about us," she began, her voice calm but heavy with emotion. "About everything we've been through and where we're going. I know we're trying to move forward, but I can't help but feel like we're still stuck in limbo. We're rebuilding, yes, but there are so many unspoken things between us, and I need to know that we're really on the same page about our future." Elijah's brow furrowed slightly as he absorbed her words. "What do you mean, exactly? Are you worried about something?" Imani took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I just feel like we've been so focused on healing the past that we haven't talked about where we want to go from here. I want us to be in sync, Elijah. I need to know that we still want the same things, that we're building the life we both want, not just fixing what was broken." Elijah paused for a moment, clearly processing her words. He had been so focused on repairing the damage that he hadn't stopped to truly consider what the future looked like for them as a couple. He had assumed that once they worked through their issues, everything would fall into place. But Imani's concerns made him realize that he hadn't given her the reassurance she needed, the reassurance that, beyond the healing, they still had a shared vision for the future. "You're right," he said quietly. "We've been so caught up in the past that we haven't really talked about the future. I'm sorry I haven't asked you more about what you need, what you want from us. I want to make sure that we're not just surviving. I want us to thrive. And I want to build a future with you, Imani, a real future. But I need to know what that looks like for you." Imani let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was a simple answer, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. Elijah wasn't just listening to her, he was hearing her. And that, for Imani, made all the difference. "I want to feel like we're building something together," she said softly. "Not just a marriage, but a life. A life where we both get to pursue our dreams and grow together. I want to be able to talk about the future without fear, without wondering if we're truly on the same path. I want to know that no matter what happens, we're in it together." Elijah nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I'm with you, Imani. I've never stopped being with you, but I know I've been neglecting the bigger picture. I've been so focused on making up for what I've done that I haven't been giving you the security you need. I can't promise that everything will always be perfect, but I promise that I will always be here. I will be your partner, in every sense of the word, and I'll work with you to build the life we both want." Imani looked into his eyes, the sincerity of his words slowly easing the tension in her chest. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until now. She needed to know that, despite everything, Elijah was still the man she had fallen in love with. She needed to know that he was willing to build a future with her, one that wasn't just about overcoming past mistakes, but about embracing the unknowns of their future together. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "That's what I've been waiting to hear. We've been through so much, and I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you. I want to know that we're moving forward, not just as a couple, but as a team." Elijah leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "We will, Imani. We'll move forward. Together." As the days passed, Imani and Elijah began to plan for their future in a way they never had before. They talked about their dreams, their goals, and what kind of life they wanted to build. They made a pact to never stop communicating, to always be honest with each other, and to always prioritize their relationship, no matter how busy life got. Elijah made it clear that he wanted to be the kind of husband who not only supported Imani emotionally, but also actively worked to create a shared vision for their life. He suggested that they start small, maybe travel more, take up new hobbies together, and invest time in things that brought them joy. For Imani, it was a relief to know that they were now truly in sync. No longer would they allow unspoken resentments or worries about the future to fester. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elijah turned to Imani, his eyes filled with love and a quiet confidence. "I'm ready to build a life with you, Imani," he said, his voice steady. "A life that's full of love, laughter, and everything we've dreamed of. I'll never stop fighting for us, and I'll never stop showing you how much you mean to me." Imani smiled, her heart full. "And I'm ready, Elijah. I'm ready for whatever comes next, as long as we're together." In that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they both knew that the future was uncertain, but they also knew that they could face it together. They were no longer defined by the pain of their past. They were building something new, a future filled with love, trust, and the unwavering commitment to each other. And for the first time in a long time, Imani felt that they were truly on the right path. The next few months were a whirlwind of growth and change. Imani and Elijah had made incredible strides in their relationship. They had found a rhythm in their daily lives that didn't feel forced or strained. They were more open with each other than they had ever been before. And even when challenges arose, they faced them together, side by side. But with this newfound peace came a realization there were still deeper layers to their healing, layers that had remained hidden, waiting to be addressed. It was a Sunday afternoon when Elijah came home from work, his face etched with exhaustion. He had been putting in long hours at the office, trying to balance the demands of his career with the needs of his marriage, and it was starting to take a toll. As he entered the living room, he found Imani sitting on the couch, a book in her hands, her eyes lost in the pages. He walked over and sat down beside her, leaning his head back against the cushions. "Imani, I'm sorry I've been so distant lately," he said, his voice full of regret. "Work's been crazy, and I know I haven't been the husband you deserve, but I want you to know that I'm really trying to balance everything." Imani put her book down and turned toward him, her expression softening. "I know, Elijah. You've been working hard, but you've also been distant emotionally. I can feel it." Elijah sighed deeply, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't want to be distant, but I've been struggling with the pressure. I feel like I'm failing at everything, at work, at home, and at being the partner you need me to be." Imani's heart ached as she listened to him. She had seen this side of Elijah before, the side that carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, convinced that he had to do everything on his own. She had felt it when he had been consumed by his work, and she had watched as he slowly began to retreat into himself, thinking he could handle everything alone. "Elijah," Imani said softly, her voice steady but firm, "you don't have to do it alone. You never have to carry everything by yourself. We're in this together, remember?" Elijah met her gaze, his eyes filled with both exhaustion and a deep sense of guilt. "I know, Imani. I just feel like I'm letting you down, like I'm not enough." Imani reached for his hand, holding it gently in hers. "You are more than enough, Elijah. You've always been enough. But we need to learn how to share the load. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to solve everything on your own. I'm here, and I want to be here for you." just like you've been here for me." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, there was silence, no distractions, no obligations, just the two of them, sitting together. Elijah's shoulders slowly relaxed as he took in her words. He had been so focused on the idea of providing and being the strong one that he had forgotten the most important thing. He didn't have to do it alone. "I've been so afraid of failing you," he confessed, his voice quiet. "I didn't want to let you down, so I tried to carry everything by myself. But I see now that I've been neglecting what really matters. You matter. Us, together, matters." Imani squeezed his hand gently, a warm smile spreading across her face. "We've been through so much, Elijah, and we've made it through because we've always had each other. We need to keep holding on to that, not just for the tough times, but for the good ones too. We need to be partners in everything, even when it feels hard." Elijah's heart swelled with emotion. He had spent so much time trying to fix everything that he had forgotten how much he had already been given. He had Imani, a woman who had stood by him, loved him through his mistakes, and never once asked for anything in return. She had sacrificed so much for their family, and now, here she was, offering him the same unwavering support, even when he had been distant. "I'm sorry, Imani," Elijah said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've let you down, and I haven't been the partner you deserve. But I promise you, from now on, I'll be here. I'll be present, and I'll show you every day that I'm not going anywhere." Imani leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. "I know you will," she whispered, "and I'm here for you, always. We'll get through this together, one step at a time." For the first time in what felt like forever, Elijah felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that it wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up for each other, being vulnerable, and accepting that they were both human. They were going to face challenges, but they would do it as a team, not as two separate individuals trying to carry the world on their backs. The next few weeks were filled with small, intentional changes. Elijah started to make more time for Imani, prioritizing their relationship in ways he hadn't before. He delegated more at work, trusting his team to handle the responsibilities that he had been carrying alone for so long. At home, he became more involved, not just in the big things, but in the everyday moments that mattered the most. Imani, too, took small steps toward her own growth. She had spent so much time nurturing their marriage that she had neglected her own needs. But she realized that in order to be the best partner to Elijah, she needed to nurture herself as well. She started taking time for her own passions, pursuing hobbies she had set aside for years, and reconnecting with friends she hadn't seen in months. She also learned how to ask for help when she needed it, trusting that Elijah would be there to support her, just as she had always supported him. As the days went by, they both learned to communicate more openly, to express their needs and desires without fear of rejection or judgment. They laughed more, fought less, and began to rediscover the simple joy of being in each other's presence. They didn't have all the answers, but they were building something stronger than they had before, a relationship rooted in trust, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elijah turned to Imani, a smile tugging at his lips. "You know, I think we've finally figured it out," he said, his voice light. "We're not perfect, but we're better than we've ever been." Imani laughed softly, her heart full. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Elijah nodded, his eyes filled with love. "Yeah, and we're only getting started." Imani smiled, the weight of everything they had been through slowly lifting. She knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but with Elijah by her side, she was ready for whatever came their way. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been before. And that, she realized, was all they needed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing that their journey was far from over. But as long as they faced it together, they could conquer anything. For the first time in a long time, Imani felt at peace. And that peace, she knew, was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, trust, and a future that was theirs to build. The following months felt like a new beginning for Imani and Elijah. They had learned how to navigate the complexities of their marriage with more grace and understanding, but there were still moments that challenged them. They were no longer defined by their past mistakes, but neither had they forgotten the lessons they had learned from the struggles they had faced. Every day was an opportunity to grow, and they were determined to make the most of it. One Friday evening, Elijah returned home from work earlier than expected. Imani was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She smiled when she saw him enter the room, his face tired but softened by the fact that he was home. Elijah walked over to her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed the top of her head. "Hey," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "You look beautiful as always." Imani chuckled, pulling away to look at him. "You're in a good mood today. What's the occasion?" Elijah smiled, pulling her closer. "No occasion, just happy to be home with you." His eyes softened as he met her gaze. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything we've been through, and how much you mean to me." Imani's heart fluttered at his words, but there was a lingering uncertainty. "I've been thinking about that too," she said softly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "How much we've been through, and how much we've changed." Elijah nodded, his hand resting gently on her cheek. "I know we've had our share of struggles, but I also know we're stronger now, and every time we face a challenge, we face it together. I'll always fight for us, Imani." Imani swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep within her. She had always known Elijah loved her, but hearing him say it again, with such conviction, filled her with a sense of security she hadn't realized she needed. She reached up and placed her hand over his, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "I love you too, Elijah, and I'm thankful for everything we've been through, for the lessons we've learned, even the hard ones." Elijah's smile grew, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "We've come a long way," he said, "and I'm proud of us. But I'm also realizing something else. I don't just want to be a good husband. I want to be the best partner I can be, not just for you, but for us. We've been through too much for me to ever take this for granted again." Imani's heart swelled at his words. She had always known Elijah had a good heart, but the way he spoke now, the way he acknowledged their growth and his own role in it, showed a depth of commitment that made her feel seen, understood, and loved in ways she had never imagined before. "I feel the same way," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I want us to continue growing, to continue building our future, but I also want to make sure we don't forget the little things that matter, the things that make us us." Elijah nodded. "Absolutely. We've already made so much progress, but the work never stops. It's the everyday moments, the ones where we choose each other, over and over, that will keep us going." Imani smiled, her heart light. "I think we're finally figuring it out. What it means to truly be partners, not just in the big stuff, but in the little things too." As the weeks passed, Elijah and Imani found themselves making even more intentional efforts to strengthen their bond. They made time for regular date nights, even if it was just sitting together in the living room watching a movie. They laughed more, shared more, and supported each other through the ups and downs of life. Elijah continued to prioritize his time at home, and Imani, in turn, allowed herself to lean into his support more freely. One Saturday morning, Imani woke up to find Elijah already in the kitchen, making breakfast. She smiled to herself, surprised and pleased by the sight. Elijah was always so busy during the week, and while he had taken steps to make more time for her, mornings like this felt like a sweet reminder of how far they had come. "Good morning," Imani greeted him as she walked into the kitchen, her eyes still sleepy but filled with affection. Ilya looked up, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Good morning, beautiful. I thought I'd surprise you with breakfast today." Imani walked over to him, leaning in to kiss him on the cheek. "Well, this is definitely a surprise. What brought this on?" Elijah smiled, setting down the spatula and turning to face her. "I've been thinking a lot about how lucky I am, and how much I appreciate you. You've been such an incredible partner through everything, and I just wanted to show you that I'm grateful." Imani felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "Elijah, You don't have to do things like this to show me that, but I appreciate it. I really do. He took her hand in his expression softening. I know you don't expect grand gestures, but I want you to know, every day, that I'm committed to us, and that I'm always here, always going to be here for you. Imani felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, unwilling to let herself cry in the moment. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words again, the reassurance that Elijah was still in this with her, still committed to building their life together. It wasn't just about the big promises. It was the small, everyday things that mattered most. And Elijah had shown her time and again that he was willing to put in the effort. I believe you, she said quietly, squeezing his hand. And I'm here too, for everything. Elijah smiled, his eyes warm and full of love. Together, right? Always, Imani replied, her heart full. As they ate breakfast together, laughing over the familiar rhythm of their conversation, Imani realized how far they had come. It wasn't perfect, and they both knew there would still be challenges ahead. But they were no longer afraid of those challenges. They had learned to face them together, with love, understanding, and commitment. And as the morning sun filtered through the window, casting a soft glow over the table, Imani knew that the future wasn't just something to be feared, it was something to be embraced. Because as long as they had each other, they could handle anything. They had come through the storm, and now they were ready to enjoy the calm. They had truly found their way back to each other, not by fixing what was broken, but by building something even stronger than before, a partnership grounded in love, respect, and the willingness to grow together. And with that, Imani knew they were unstoppable. The months that followed were filled with new beginnings and continued growth for Imani and Elijah. They had spent so much time rebuilding what had been broken in their marriage, but now they found themselves stepping into a new phase, one where they didn't just survive together but thrived. There was still work to be done, but there was an undeniable sense of peace between them. They had learned how to communicate better, how to be vulnerable, and, most importantly, how to appreciate each other in ways they hadn't before. They no longer took their love for granted. It was late one Friday evening when Elijah came home from work, his eyes tired but a small smile playing on his lips. Imani had just finished preparing dinner, the smell of her cooking filling the house. As he walked through the door, he immediately dropped his briefcase and walked toward the kitchen, finding her putting the finishing touches on the meal. "Smells incredible," he said, his voice warm and affectionate. "You always make everything feel like home." Imani turned to face him, her heart lifting at his words. "Thanks," she said, her smile matching his. "I figured we could have a nice dinner tonight. Just the two of us. No distractions." Elijah smiled, moving to stand beside her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That sounds perfect," he said softly. "I've missed spending quiet evenings like this with you. It's easy to forget how important the small things are when life gets busy." Imani paused, her eyes searching his face. "I know what you mean," she said thoughtfully. "We've been so focused on rebuilding and healing, and now it feels like we're finally starting to enjoy the fruits of all that hard work." Elijah nodded, taking her hand in his. "And I'm so grateful for that. For you. I don't know where I'd be without you. I feel like I've finally woken up and realized just how much you mean to me, how much we mean to each other." Imani smiled, her heart swelling at his words. She had always known that their love was strong, but hearing Elijah say this, knowing how hard he had fought to prove it, made her feel more loved than ever before. "I feel the same way," she whispered, squeezing his hand. They sat down at the dinner table, the conversation flowing effortlessly as they ate. It was during their meal that Imani realized just how much things had changed. She remembered the tension that once hung between them, the unspoken resentments, the hurt that neither of them had known how to address. Now, it felt like they had crossed into a new chapter. They were no longer held hostage by the past, and they weren't just moving forward, they were creating something new together. Something that was theirs to define. As the evening wore on, they finished their meal, and Elijah stood to clear the dishes. But before he could take them to the kitchen, Imani stopped him, her voice soft but serious. "Elijah, there's something I've been thinking about," she began, her heart racing slightly. "I've been reflecting on everything we've been through, and while I know we're in a good place now, there's still something I want to talk about. Something that's been on my mind for a while." Elijah paused, turning to face her with a concerned expression. "What is it, Imani? You know you can tell me anything." Imani took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking about our future, about what comes next for us. We've done so much work on ourselves and on our relationship, but I need to know that we're both still aligned on where we want to go. I want to make sure that we're on the same page, that we're both committed to building a future that's not just about surviving, but about thriving together." Elijah sat down beside her, his face serious but gentle. "I understand, Imani, and I think you're right. We've been so focused on healing that we haven't really taken the time to think about what's next. What do you need to feel like we're moving forward together?" Imani looked at him, her eyes full of sincerity. "I need to know that we're both working toward the same goals, that we're not just trying to fix what's broken, but that we're creating something we both want. I need to know that we're building a future where we're not just happy now, but where we're both fulfilled, doing the things that make us both happy. I want us to support each other's dreams, to grow together, and to know that whatever comes, we'll face it as a team." Elijah's heart swelled at her words. He had always known that their relationship was a partnership, but hearing her express it so clearly, with such passion and hope, made him realize just how important it was for them to have a shared vision for the future. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "We need to talk about our goals, about what we want to achieve together. And not just in the big things, but in the small ones too. I want us to grow as individuals, but also as a couple. And I want to make sure that we're both happy with the direction we're heading in." Imani smiled, relieved to hear his words. "That's exactly what I needed to hear, Elijah. I want to know that we're both moving towards something, and that it's something we both want. I don't want us to get stuck again. I want to keep growing, both as a person and as your partner." Elijah took her hand, his eyes filled with love and commitment. "We're in this together, Imani. And whatever happens, I'll make sure that we're always growing. We'll keep building our future, one step at a time. I want the same things you do. I want us to be happy, fulfilled, and always moving forward." Imani felt a sense of peace settle over her as she listened to his words. They had come so far, and now, more than ever, she felt confident that they could continue to build the life they both dreamed of. It wouldn't always be easy, but with Elijah by her side, she knew they could face anything. "I'm ready," she whispered. "I'm ready to keep building with you, together." Elijah smiled and kissed her forehead. Together. That night, as they sat on the couch, their hands intertwined, Imani felt a quiet joy fill her heart. She knew that their journey wasn't over, that there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt confident that they were on the right path. They had learned to face their past, to rebuild what had been broken, and now, they were ready to build something even greater, something that was theirs to define. They were no longer living in the shadow of their mistakes. They were building a future based on love, trust, and a deep commitment to each other. And as they looked toward the future, Imani knew that, no matter what came their way, they would face it together, because together, they were unstoppable. The next few weeks were a mix of growth and quiet reflection for both Imani and Elijah. They had finally come to a point where they could talk openly about their future without fear or doubt. It wasn't that they had everything figured out, far from it, but the conversation had shifted from survival to thriving, from fixing what was broken to building what could be. There was an undeniable sense of optimism in the air, but it wasn't an unrealistic hope. It was grounded in the trust they had earned, the commitment they had shown each other, and the hard work they had put into their relationship. One evening, after a long day at work, Elijah came home early, something that had become a rarity over the past few months. Imani was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine, her legs tucked beneath her. When he walked in, She looked up, a smile spreading across her face. "Elijah," she said, sitting up. "You're home early. Everything okay?" He smiled back, but there was something in his eyes that told her he had been thinking deeply. "Yeah, everything's fine. I just needed some time to think. Work's been overwhelming lately, and I've been so caught up in it that I haven't taken the time to appreciate the moments I have with you." Imani's heart softened at his words. She had noticed the weight of his stress in the past few weeks, even as he had been more present at home. She also knew that, despite his best efforts, he had been battling with the demands of his career and his desire to be the perfect partner. She stood up and walked toward him, taking his hand in hers. "How about we take tonight off?" Imani suggested gently, her voice filled with warmth. "No work, no distractions, just us. We've been talking about taking a trip, right? Maybe we can start planning it." Elijah's eyes lit up at the idea, and he squeezed her hand. "That sounds perfect. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. Maybe we can go somewhere quiet, just the two of us. No phones, no pressure." Imani smiled, her heart fluttering at the thought of escaping from the hustle and bustle, even if just for a little while. She had missed moments like this, simple, peaceful times with Elijah, where they could reconnect without the weight of the world hanging over them. "I love that idea," she said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Let's find a place to just be together, recharge, and remind ourselves of how far we've come." As the evening wore on, they spent time together, discussing their plans for the trip. They talked about destinations, the kind of activities they wanted to do, and what they hoped to experience while they were away. For the first time in a long time, they allowed themselves to dream about the future without the weight of the past holding them back. The next few days were filled with excitement as they finalized their plans. They chose a remote cabin by the lake, nestled in the mountains, far from the noise and distractions of city life. It was exactly what they needed, a quiet retreat where they could focus on each other and take the time to truly reconnect. When the weekend of their trip finally arrived, they packed their bags, their hearts light with anticipation. The drive was long, but the scenery was breathtaking. Endless fields, towering trees, and winding roads that led them further away from the stresses of their everyday lives. As they reached their destination, the peaceful surroundings seemed to seep into their souls, calming the tension that had built up over the past few months. The cabin was small but cozy, with large windows that overlooked the lake. It was everything they had hoped for: isolated, peaceful, and full of natural beauty. The air was crisp, the water calm, and the silence was only broken by the occasional bird call or the rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was the perfect setting for them to reset, to breathe, and to truly focus on each other. That evening, after settling in and unpacking, they sat by the fire, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing. Elijah looked at Imani with a softness in his eyes that made her heart swell. "I didn't realize how much I needed this," he said, his voice filled with a quiet awe. "This time with you, away from everything, is exactly what we needed." Imani leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I've been feeling the same way. It's easy to get caught up in the routine, in the daily grind, and forget what really matters. I just want to make sure we keep moments like this." Elijah wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "We will, Imani. I promise. We've learned so much over the past year. We've learned to communicate, to fight for each other, and to prioritize what's important. And I want to keep doing that. For you, for us." Imani smiled, the warmth of his words settling deep in her chest. "I believe you, Elijah, and I want the same thing. I want us to keep growing, keep supporting each other, and keep building the life we've always dreamed of." As they sat by the fire, the flames casting a warm glow over their faces, Imani felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The road they had traveled together had been difficult, but it had brought them closer. They had faced their fears, their flaws, and their insecurities, and they had come out stronger for it. The next few days were filled with quiet adventures, long walks by the lake, cooking meals together, and spending evenings talking about everything they had yet to experience. They laughed more than they had in months, rediscovering the joy that had always existed between them. It was a reminder of who they had been when they first met, the carefree, adventurous spirits who had fallen in love without fear, without hesitation. By the time the weekend came to a close, Imani and Elijah knew that this trip had been more than just a getaway. It had been a chance to rediscover each other, to reconnect in ways that words couldn't fully capture. It had been a reminder of the life they were building together, one filled with love, understanding, and a commitment to never take each other for granted. As they drove back home, the silence between them felt different, calm, content, and full of unspoken understanding. Elijah reached over and took Imani's hand in his fingers interlacing with hers. "I don't ever want to lose this," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "This love, this connection, this us. I'm so thankful for you, Imani, for everything we've been through, and everything we will face together." Imani smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "We've got this, Elijah, together." As they continued the drive home, the road ahead felt open and full of possibilities. They had come so far, and they were just getting started. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure: they would face it side by side, hand in hand, and nothing could take that away from them. The weeks following their trip to the cabin were a time of reflection and reaffirmation. Imani and Elijah returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. They were more in tune with each other than ever, more aware of what they needed as individuals and as partners. The trip had allowed them to pause, to step back from their hectic lives, and to remember the core of their relationship, the deep love that had always bound them together. But as they settled back into their routine, the reality of everyday life began to set in once again. Elijah's work continued to demand his time, and Imani found herself balancing her own responsibilities. There were moments when the pressure of their busy schedules threatened to pull them apart, and though they had grown in so many ways, they knew that the challenge was not behind them. It would take continuous effort to keep their connection strong. One evening, as Elijah arrived home after a particularly long day at work, he found Imani sitting on the couch, her fingers nervously tapping the armrest. There was a tension in the air that he could immediately sense. He dropped his briefcase by the door and walked over to her, his eyes softening when he saw the way she was holding herself. "Hey, what's going on?" Elijah asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Imani glanced up at him, her expression conflicted. She hadn't wanted to burden him, but she knew they couldn't keep ignoring the elephant in the room. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," she began, her voice quiet but serious. "About everything we've worked through, and about how much we've changed. And while I know we're in a good place, I still feel like we're both holding back in certain areas, like we haven't fully let go of some of the past." Elijah sat down beside her, his brow furrowing in thought. "What do you mean? We've made so much progress, haven't we?" Imani sighed, running a hand through her hair. "We have, but there are things we haven't fully addressed yet. We're doing better at being present for each other, but there are still times when I feel like we're not truly connected, like we're still afraid to be completely vulnerable. I don't want us to go through the motions. I want us to be honest, even when it's hard." Elijah's heart tightened at her words. He had been so focused on making things work, on showing up for her in the ways he thought she needed, that he had missed the deeper emotional layers of their relationship. He had been so afraid of repeating his past mistakes, of falling short again, that he hadn't fully embraced the vulnerability Imani was asking for. He reached out, taking her hand in his thumb brushing over her skin as he spoke. "I hear you, Imani," he said softly. "And you're right. We've been so focused on the big issues, on rebuilding trust, that we've neglected the small, everyday moments of vulnerability. I've been afraid to open up completely, because I don't want to lose you, but I see now that in holding back, I'm only creating distance between us." Imani looked at him, her heart swelling at his honesty. She knew it wasn't easy for him to admit that, but it was what she needed to hear. She needed to know that they could both be fully open with each other, without fear or hesitation. She squeezed his hand, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't want to lose you either, Elijah," she said softly. "But I need to feel like we're both giving everything to this. I need to feel like we can talk about anything, even the hard stuff, and that it won't scare us away. I don't want to keep pretending that everything's perfect when there are things we still need to work through." Elijah's eyes softened as he looked at her, understanding her more deeply than he ever had before. "I'm sorry, Imani. I've been so focused on doing things the right way, on fixing everything, that I've forgotten the importance of just being with you. Not trying to solve everything, but just being present, open, and honest with each other." Imani smiled gently, her heart easing as she felt the sincerity of his words. "I know, Elijah, and I'm not blaming you. We've both been trying, and we've made so much progress. But I think it's time we stop holding back. We need to let ourselves be vulnerable, even when it's uncomfortable. We need to trust that our love is strong enough to carry us through those moments." Elijah leaned in, brushing his lips against her forehead, his breath warm against her skin. "I trust you, Imani. I trust us. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep building this with you." The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. They both understood that, in order to move forward, they needed to be fully open with each other. No more walls, no more holding back. It wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to face the hard truths together. The next few weeks were filled with deeper conversations and moments of emotional intimacy. They talked about their fears, their desires, their dreams for the future, and the things they had never shared before. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when the old patterns of fear and doubt tried to resurface. But they were learning to navigate those moments with grace, with love, and with patience. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Elijah turned to Imani, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. "Imani, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we need to be more vulnerable with each other. And I realize that I've been holding on to some things, some fears, some insecurities that I haven't shared with you. And it's time for me to let them go." Imani looked at him, her heart racing slightly. She knew that this was a big step for him, and she wanted to give him the space to open up. "Elijah, you don't have to do this alone. Whatever it is, I'm here. We'll get through it together." He took a deep breath, his voice shaking slightly as he spoke. "I've always been afraid of failing, afraid of not being enough, not just for you, but for myself. And when things started to get tough, when I saw us falling apart, I panicked. I didn't know how to fix it, so I shut down. I thought if I kept trying to make everything right, I could protect us. But I realize now that I was pushing you away in the process." Imani's eyes softened with understanding. She had seen the signs, the way Elijah withdrew, the way he took on too much, thinking he could fix everything on his own. "You don't have to be perfect, Elijah. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be here, with me." Tears welled up in Elijah's eyes as he looked at her. "I'm sorry, Imani. I never meant to push you away. I just wanted to protect you, to fix everything. But I see now that I was only making it harder for both of us." Imani reached out, pulling him into a hug, her heart swelling with compassion. "You don't have to carry everything alone, Elijah. We're a team. We've always been a team. And as long as we're together, we'll face everything, no matter how hard it gets." As they held each other, Imani knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment where they could truly let go of their fears, their insecurities, and embrace the future together, whatever it held. And as they pulled apart, looking into each other's eyes, they knew that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. They had rebuilt their relationship piece by piece, and now they were stronger than ever. "I love you, Elijah," Imani whispered, her voice full of conviction. "I love you, Imani," Elijah replied, his voice steady and sure. And as they sat together, side by side, hands intertwined, they knew that they had come through the storm. Their love had been tested, but it had only grown stronger, more resilient, and more beautiful than ever before. Together, they were unstoppable. The change that Imani and Elijah had longed for was no longer just a dream. It had become their reality. Their connection was deeper than ever before, rooted in a trust and vulnerability that hadn't existed in the past. But the path to this place had been anything but easy. It had been filled with struggles, setbacks, and painful lessons. Yet through it all, they had held on to one another, refusing to give up on the love that had brought them together in the first place. Now, with every day that passed, they felt the strength of their bond growing, not just in the moments of happiness, but in the quiet, steady moments where they simply existed together. One evening, as autumn began to take its hold on the world outside, Imani sat by the window, watching the leaves fall in vibrant colors. The air was crisp, and the sky above was painted with shades of pink and orange. Elijah was in the kitchen, humming softly to himself as he prepared dinner. It had become a routine for them, this peaceful evening time, when they could unwind, talk about their day, and just be together. But tonight, as Imani looked out at the world, she felt a sense of uncertainty stirring in her heart. The uncertainty wasn't about Elijah or their relationship. It was about her. She had spent so much time focusing on healing, on rebuilding, and on growing with Elijah, that she hadn't taken a step back to reflect on her own dreams and aspirations. She had been putting herself second for so long, supporting Elijah, supporting their family. But now she felt a quiet call within herself, a call to reconnect with her own passions, to rediscover the things that made her feel alive outside of her marriage. Imani knew that in order to fully embrace the future with Elijah, she needed to feel whole on her own first. She needed to rediscover her own sense of identity, her own dreams, and her own path. The relationship they had built was beautiful, but it couldn't replace the need for her to feel like she was more than just someone's wife or partner. She needed to feel like herself again. When Elijah returned to the living room, he noticed the distant look in her eyes, the way she seemed lost in thought. He set the plates down on the table, walking over to her with a concerned expression. "Imani, is everything okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Imani looked at him, the weight of her thoughts heavy on her chest. She knew she had to share her feelings with him, just as they had promised each other they would. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she began, her voice soft. "About everything. About us, but also about me. About what I need, what I've been missing." Elijah's expression shifted to one of concern, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I've been so focused on rebuilding everything with you, on making sure we're both happy, that I think I've forgotten about myself. I've forgotten what makes me happy outside of being your wife. I haven't been thinking about my own goals, my own dreams. I need to reconnect with who I am, outside of us." There was silence for a moment as Elijah processed her words. It was a silence not born of discomfort, but of understanding. He knew that their relationship had been about both of them healing and growing together. But he also knew that for Imani to feel fully fulfilled, she needed to reclaim her own identity. "I get it," Elijah said, his voice soft and steady. "I've seen you give so much of yourself to me, to us, and I know how important it is for you to be whole, for you to feel like you're doing something just for you. I want you to have that, Imani. I want you to pursue your passions, to find what makes you feel alive outside of everything else. You deserve it." Imani felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been afraid that her desire for independence would be misunderstood, that Elijah might feel abandoned or less important. But here he was, offering her the space and support she needed to grow. "I don't know what that looks like yet," Imani continued, her voice vulnerable. "I don't know what my next step is, but I feel like I've lost touch with some part of myself, and I want to find it again." Elijah took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Take your time, Imani. I'm here, and I'll support you no matter what. Whatever you need to do to find yourself again, I'm with you. We'll figure it out together. But I want you to know that you're not alone in this." Tears welled up in Imani's eyes as she looked at him. His words were the reassurance she had needed, the permission she had been too afraid to give herself. She had spent so much of her life being a caretaker, a nurturer. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt like it was her turn to focus on herself. "Thank you," Imani whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." Elijah smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You won't have to. You're not alone in this. We're in it together. Always." The rest of the evening passed in a gentle calm. They enjoyed their dinner, laughing over silly stories and savoring the peaceful silence between them. For the first time in a long time, Imani felt like she could breathe freely, knowing that she didn't have to have all the answers right now. She didn't have to know exactly what her next steps were, as long as she was on the path to discovering them. Over the next few weeks, Imani started to take small steps toward reconnecting with herself. She spent more time reading books that inspired her, revisiting hobbies she had abandoned in the rush of life. She also started to consider new career opportunities, ones that aligned with her passions and values. There was no rush, no pressure. It was simply about rediscovering who she was outside of her role as a wife and partner. As Imani took these steps, Elijah remained her biggest supporter. He encouraged her to pursue whatever made her feel fulfilled, and he celebrated her small victories along the way. They didn't have all the answers, but they were learning how to balance their individual journeys with their shared one. One night, after a long day of work, Elijah sat on the couch with Imani, who had been working on a new project. She had started a small business, something she had dreamed of for years, and tonight she had made her first sale. The pride in her eyes was unmistakable as she turned to him, a smile lighting up her face. "I did it," she said, her voice full of excitement. "I made my first sale. It's just the beginning, but it feels like such a big step." Elijah beamed at her, his heart swelling with pride. "I knew you could do it, Imani. This is just the start of something amazing." Imani leaned in, her face alight with happiness. "Thank you, Elijah, for everything, for supporting me, for believing in me. I couldn't have done this without you." He kissed her forehead gently, his voice filled with love. "You did this, Imani. You found your way back to yourself, and I'm proud of you." In that moment, Imani realized just how far they had come. The road to rediscovery wasn't easy, but with Elijah by her side, she had learned to prioritize herself again. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she was on the right path. As they sat together, their hands entwined, Imani knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. They had learned that love wasn't just about surviving, it was about growing, evolving, and supporting each other through every step of the journey. And as long as they had that, they could conquer anything. The days after Imani's small business breakthrough were filled with a renewed sense of purpose and excitement. She had started to feel a spark in herself that had long been dormant. Elijah, too, noticed the change in her. Her eyes had a new light in them, and there was a new energy in her steps. It wasn't just about the sale, though that had been a huge milestone. It was the fact that Imani was rediscovering her confidence, her independence, and her passions. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was truly living for herself, and Elijah couldn't have been prouder of her. But as with any journey, the road wasn't always smooth. There were moments of doubt, moments when Imani questioned whether she was doing the right thing, whether she was enough. Elijah was there through all of it, his constant presence a reminder that she wasn't alone in her pursuit of happiness. They had both learned the hard way that the key to a lasting, fulfilling relationship wasn't just love, it was also trust, patience, and the willingness to support each other's individual dreams. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Elijah turned to Imani, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about everything we've been through. About how much we've grown, both individually and together. And I'm really proud of us, Imani. We've come so far." Imani smiled, her heart swelling at his words. She had been thinking about that too, the way they had both changed over the course of their relationship, the way they had learned to communicate, to support each other. The wounds from their past still lingered, but they no longer defined them. They had turned their pain into a source of strength, something they could both draw from as they moved forward together. "I'm proud of us too," Imani said softly, looking out at the sunset. "But I think the most important thing we've learned is that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be real with each other. We have to be vulnerable. And I've learned that, for me, that vulnerability is what makes me feel truly connected to you." Elijah nodded, his gaze fixed on her, his voice steady. "I've learned the same thing. We've been through a lot, and there were times when I thought we wouldn't make it. But now, I see that the only way forward is by being honest, by being open. And no matter what happens, I want us to always keep that openness. I want us to continue growing, not just as a couple, but as individuals too." Imani felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had always known that her relationship with Elijah was strong, but now she understood the depth of that strength. It wasn't just love, it was a partnership, built on mutual respect, vulnerability, and an unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. "Elijah," she began, her voice quiet but full of conviction. "I think that's why we've made it this far. We've never given up on each other, even when things were tough. We've always found a way to keep moving forward. And I think that's something we'll continue to do, no matter what comes next." Elijah squeezed her hand, his eyes soft but filled with a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't agree more. I'm so grateful for you, Imani, for everything you've taught me, for the way you've loved me even when I didn't deserve it. I'll never take that for granted." Imani smiled, her heart light. "You don't have to thank me. We've both given a lot to each other, and that's what makes us stronger." As the evening wore on, the stars began to twinkle in the sky above them. It was a peaceful night, the kind that made everything feel still and right. Imani leaned her head on Elijah's shoulder, her eyes closed, savoring the quiet moment. They had made it through so much, and though there would always be challenges ahead, she knew that together they could face anything. The next few weeks brought new opportunities for both of them. Imani's business continued to grow, and Elijah's work began to settle into a more manageable pace. They spent more time together, exploring new places, trying new things, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. Their weekends were filled with laughter, with long walks, with dinners at home, and with quiet evenings spent talking about their dreams for the future. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Elijah turned to Imani, his face serious but filled with excitement. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about making sure we're not just surviving, but thriving. And I want to take things to the next level, not just in our relationship, but in our life together. I want us to start planning for the future in a way that makes us both feel secure and excited." Imani raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his words. "What do you mean?" "I mean that it's time for us to start thinking about the long term," Elijah said, his voice filled with determination. "We've built a strong foundation, and now I think we need to set some bigger goals for ourselves. I want us to be able to look back one day and say that we didn't just let life happen to us, we made it happen. I want us to keep growing, to keep building, and to keep pushing each other to be the best versions of ourselves." Imani's heart swelled at his words. "I love that idea," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "I've been thinking the same thing. We've worked so hard to get here, and I want us to keep moving forward. I want to build a future where we're both proud of what we've accomplished, both individually and together." Elijah smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "We're already on the right track, Imani, and whatever we do, we'll do it together. We've built something amazing already, and I know we can make our dreams come true. It's just a matter of staying focused, staying open, and staying true to ourselves." Imani nodded, her heart full of gratitude. "We've come so far, Elijah, and I know that no matter what comes next, we'll face it as a team." Over the next few months, they began to take steps toward their future. They made financial plans, started discussing potential new adventures, and began mapping out the life they wanted to create. They set goals for themselves, both personally and as a couple, and took pride in the progress they were making. One evening, as they sat in their living room, reflecting on the journey they had taken together, Imani realized just how much they had grown. She had always known that love was powerful. But now she understood that love wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about the quiet moments of understanding, the deep conversations, and the willingness to grow together, no matter how hard it got. Elijah turned to her, his voice soft but filled with certainty. Imani, I can't imagine my life without you. You've been my rock, my partner, my love, and I want to keep building a future with you, no matter what comes our way. Imani smiled, her heart swelling with affection. And I want to keep building with you, Elijah. We've been through so much, and we're still standing, together. And that's all I need. In that moment, as they sat together, hand in hand, Imani knew that their journey was far from over. They had faced challenges, but they had always found a way to move forward. And now, with the future stretching out before them, they were ready to face whatever came next, side by side, heart to heart. They had built something beautiful, something strong, and with each passing day, they knew that their love would only grow deeper, more resilient, and more powerful than ever before.